Hey folks, welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. Thank you for tuning in as always. I'm happy that you're here, as you know I always am, so I appreciate you listening. I'm feeling, it's an exhausting kind of day. It's that kind of day in New York City. Memorial Day weekend when I'm recording this just happened, so it's that sort of in-between combination of like humid and cloudy. Like the day just has a feeling of bleh. But I still like to, on days like this, remind myself that even a bleh day in New York is better than a good day when I had to stay. Let's try that again. When I had to stay inside working retail. So trying to continue to maintain a healthy perspective. My guest on the show today is comedian Sharron Paul. Sharron I've known for almost as long as I've been in New York City, and part of what I'm doing with this podcast is, in addition to trying to reach out and interview people that I'm fans of, I also, part of it is the ability to reconnect with people I haven't seen in a while. So this is one of those conversations, because Sharron I've known. You might have seen her. She was in this Now This video talking about her the number of side jobs she's had being a comedian. But she's also, I know her because she runs this very popular show at Union Hall in New York City called Cheap Date Comedy, which always has really good lineups. And if you're in New York City or in Brooklyn, you should make sure to check it out. In the episode today, she talks about the next iteration of that show, and we're going to get into a little bit of the details, but also a lot of New York City talk, because I'm starting to find the native New Yorkers in my peer group in the comedy scene. So this was a really nice chance to get to catch up with Sharron and talk shop. So I'm looking forward to sharing this with you guys. If you enjoy the show and you want to share it with others, we are on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. I'm hoping Spotify will approve me someday. I don't know when that's going to happen, but fingers crossed. And I'm on Twitter at Comic Will Carey. You can also follow the podcast on Twitter at AwesomeDPod. And if you want to add us to your favorite playlist or subscribe, it helps other people discover the show. And if you want to tell a friend, that I appreciate that you would do that. So thank you very much. And let's go to my chat with comedian Sharron Paul.
On this day, let's see. I've not committed these things to memory.
Oh, it's all good. But that's cool. Yeah, I'd forgotten. So Biggie and Empire Strikes Back. On the same day.
Today is May. May 21st.
Yeah. Awesome. That's a cool idea for a show you were telling me about. And I was talking about this a little bit, but I feel like there's an unfair rise in themes of comedy shows where the idea is to like somehow be aggressive towards the comedian or stump the comedian or like, have a dominatrix beat up the comedian.
Like we've literally become jesters.
Yeah. Like, or some sort of like I always think about it like when I like read like Twitter and the news and stuff. Have you ever had like a job where you got this like big monumental task and it's real daunting, but there's a bunch of smaller, easy tasks and you just focus on those. And I feel like abusing comedians are like those smaller tasks compared to like big societal changes and stuff.
Definitely
is kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, abusing comedians is I guess it's an easy, fun night out if that's your thing. If you're like a bit of a sadist, you
right.
Get entertained to see people be embarrassed or berated.
Yeah, or like just this idea that, like, you can hold some power over someone temporarily. Like you get beaten down by like your spouse or your boss all day, or the government or what have you, and then you can go to a show and yell at a comedian. That is where I've been thinking. Is where my mind's been lately.
Have you done any of those shows?
I don't think so. I don't get asked to do a ton of shows. Really, I've not thought about it too hard, but so I mostly am just booking my own things the past couple of years.
Good way to go about it.
Yeah, but I've never been asked to do like a pay it or pain. I don't even know if I would, because like, And that's a very popular show, but I feel like if I was an audience member of that show, I'd vote Payne every single time, regardless if the person had a good set or not.
You're the sadist. It's you.
Well, because that's where the fun of that idea is, I think.
No one in your heart could earn just to get paid.
Oh, I could. In my heart of hearts, but I feel like a collective audience, like they'd have like a hive mind situation where they're like, okay, we just want to see people get beat up. It goes to like
They're just a mob.
Yeah, like a Daffy Duck kind of situation. Like you don't want it to go well for him, or Wile E. Coyote. You just want to watch him fall off the cliff and go and splat. So I feel like you're one of the people that I've known for a really long time since I've been in New York doing stand up, because I got here in 2009.
So yeah, you were
2010. 2010.
That's exactly when I started stand up. I started stand up not quite on this day, but May of 2010.
So you're almost at 10 years.
Yeah.
Nice.
Which is insane to think about.
I know, just a lot of time, and now I feel like I'm at the point where I have like the tools kind of in place where I don't necessarily need to like I feel like I have sort of the skill set now. I'm just refining the jokes and trying to make the jokes better now that with my skill set.
They say, it takes 10 years to be an overnight success.
That's what I've heard. I've talked about this with a few people where there's these comedians that are called like overnight successes, but like they've been doing stand up for a long time. Like actual overnight, no one would want to see an actual overnight stand up success because that person could have one good set and that's it.
At the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, people take a decade or so. I mean, some people are luckier than others, obviously, but you take the time, you hone your craft, you get really good at it. And then it seems overnight because the average Joe doesn't see you grinding every night. So you just pop up all over the place all of a sudden. It's just like, oh, wow, they came out of nowhere. Nowhere being mics and shows every night for the better part of however many years. Yeah,
in basements, in bars and pizza places and
exactly.
and things of that nature. So where did you, are you ever, why do I think you're from New York? Is that true?
I am. Yeah,
you are.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, I am in New York.
That's why I thought. So born and raised.
Yes.
I think you're maybe like the fourth or fifth native New Yorker I've had on the show out of almost 100 episodes now.
Wow.
So a rare breed.
I was going to say, yeah, we are a rarity. I talk about it on stage. I say native New Yorkers, it seems like we've been raptured and nobody told me. Everybody's gone. I don't know where we've gone.
Yeah. California. Maybe.
Probably. Or just cheaper places, period.
Oh, right. Or, yeah, I would guess either California or at a certain age, Florida is popular. So what part of New York did you grow up in?
Brooklyn.
Brooklyn? What neighborhood?
Brownsville.
Brownsville. So like M train, J train?
No, L train and 3 train.
L train and 3 train. Okay. Now I've placed it.
I'm over where they cross, which a lot of people don't realize happens. Like people are just learning that now during this L train debacle, that the L train and the 3 train cross each other.
Right. And now they're like, well, okay, I could wait 20 minutes to get into Manhattan, or I could just take it a couple stops way out there and then get back onto the 3. Yeah, there's that segment of Brooklyn that even like the hipster Brooklyn community hasn't really figured out yet, like the Z train.
Right.
Like I feel like they're like, oh no, the Z train,
Because it seems like a myth because you so rarely see the Z train, though I take it to work most mornings.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
My fiance was born and raised in Brooklyn, never rode the G train until she met me.
I feel like I wasn't, well, no, I take that back. I was about to say, I feel like I was an adult before I ever took the G train. I guess before I took it regularly. I feel like there were a handful of times in high school because I had friends who lived in Queens. But other than that, like I had zero business on the G train. But now my boyfriend lives off the G train, so I take it all the time.
Gotcha. And so what's the vibe in Brownsville like?
I would tell people for the most part, it is almost strictly residential. Like it's not a destination like, oh, let's have a night out in Brownsville. It's where people go to bed. For the most part.
Is it like, because there are these like, is it like suburban in feel? Because there are these like parts of Queens and Brooklyn, like Bay Ridge, that I feel like I stepped off the train and I'm in Long Island somewhere.
Yeah, like where I grew up, a lot of people are just like, "Are you sure this isn't Queens?" Like if they've like dropped me off home or like stop by, they're like, "This feels like Queens." Literally, like my block, like where my mom's house is. It's a very suburban area across from like a baseball field, but it's the neighborhood is literally divided by the 3 train tracks, so it's just like private homes to the left, and then literally on the other side of the tracks, it's projects as far as the eye can see.
Right.
So it's got an interesting balance.
Very stark socioeconomical divide.
Right, literally divided by the tracks. It's a very literal.
Right.
I don't want to say right side or wrong side of the tracks, but that visual is there.
I know what you mean. This neighborhood is kind of like this. Like if you go up to Broadway, you see all these like up and coming like luxury rentals and like nice grocery stores. And then if you take the bus a couple blocks down to towards Queensbridge, it's like
it's a whole different neighborhood.
It's a whole different vibe. A whole different vibe. That's kind of what has always interested me. It interests me about New York, and when I was living in Baltimore, it made me nervous because I didn't have like my big city like skills and frame of mind set.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in really rural boonies, southern Maryland, about an hour and a half south of DC, and most people don't know you can go that far south of DC and still be in Maryland. And then I went to college at Towson University, so in Baltimore County, and then would go down to the city periodically for like concerts and stuff. But I was not wired for Baltimore growing up where I did.
Got it.
So
what was like the population of your town? Do you know?
800.
Wow. Okay, that was very much rural.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Like my first, it's like a 20-minute drive. It's like a 20-minute drive anywhere
to get to
20-minute drive
or
20-minute drive to like go to my friend's house, 20-minute drive to get to my first job at Kmart, 20-minute drive, no food delivered to us.
Right.
All of that.
So it's like when you go grocery shopping, you have to make sure you have everything.
Yeah, you're stocking up. I think thinking about it now, I feel like I was like the step, like if there's a metaphorical subway line that goes from suburbia to rural America to off the grid living, I was the stop before off the grid living. Like we still had a TV for a while.
For a bit, eventually.
Yeah. So that's kind of how I grew up. So it took me a while to get like my big city skills.
Yeah, I was gonna say, now you're living in like a cool part of Queens. Does it feel like your life has done like a 180?
I feel like I'm definitely a completely more like, not necessarily worldly person, but I definitely feel like a more savvy person than I did when I first moved here, which I like.
Do you think that's time or literally city living, or a bit of both?
Bit of both. Like my fiance can't handle being outside a major city for more than 3 days. I'm actually curious now that I thought about that. When you leave like New York or you go out to the like suburbs or like outside of major cities, do you ever start getting that like, oh, there's nothing going on kind of feel?
I kind of like it sometimes. I like to get out of the city every so often just to experience something different. Excuse me. I was just traveling. I just got back from Sweden last weekend.
Oh, nice.
And I mean, for the most part of that trip, I was in Stockholm, which is still a city, but it's not necessarily as like bustling and crowded and fast paced as New York is.
Sure.
But it's a city as well. But I did spend like a day or so, an hour and a half outside of the city in a small town called Nyköping. And I liked it there. I thought it was really beautiful. And I probably could have spent more time there and it wouldn't have driven me crazy or anything. But yeah, no, I like just the different experiences, different vibes of different places. I once spent about 2 weeks in Wisconsin and I loved it. Like I was just like, okay, I could get down with this for a bit.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I find I can drop back into it pretty easily because like, and I'm pretty great at doing nothing. is kind of where I'm at. I love running around like a crazy person because, you know, that's just the nature of the business that we're in. Mm-hmm. But I also am really great at doing nothing. Really great at just looking at some trees, you know, looking at the waves crashing onto shore, stuff like that.
I do love being near water. The only issue with like being around a bunch of trees is I'm allergic to everything.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I've just got really bad allergies. I'm basically allergic to outside. So I get allergy shots every week just to, you know, exist.
Oh, damn. And so what was your home life like growing up in Brooklyn? What did your folks do?
My mom worked for the city. For a long time, she worked in the shelter system. Mm-hmm. And then she worked for an organization called CASA, which that's a city organization that basically assigns social workers and home health aides to people. Like she was in a supervisory position doing that. And my dad had a lot of jobs when I was growing up. Uh-huh. I remember he sold cable for a bit when I was a kid. Uh-huh. He sold water filtration systems. But over the job that he retired from was working as a disabilities analyst for the state.
Oh, wow. Well, so what does that
like
entail
literally
exactly?
like if you hurt yourself and you applied for disability, like he decided, okay, you're not a fraud, you get disability.
So is he going out to people's houses like, nah, you don't look like you're that disabled?
No, not quite. That wasn't quite it. Like more on the processing end of things.
Gotcha. Okay. So very, very, again, we're very hardwired into the city, a kind of thing.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
Cool.
Very much of the people.
Yeah, and so now I'm trying to trace this because if you became a comedian, something must have gone wrong at some point. I mean, even if it's not catastrophic. So I always like asking this. So are you an only child? Do you have siblings?
I'm an only child.
Only child, me too. And we have the same birthday.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So like when you were in like middle school, high school, like what kind of kid were you? Because I was before I discovered theater, I was the like reclusive gamer type who never like
you didn't want to interact with people.
Was not very good at interacting with people. But then when I discovered theater, I was like, oh, this is the thing that I like, staying after school till 5 and then waiting for someone to come pick me up. that kind of thing.
Funny enough, I feel like in middle school is when I wasn't so involved in after school activities. Because I was in elementary school. Like in elementary school, I was in dance, I was in choir, I did all the things. Mm-hmm. Middle school, not as much. But I think I was just going through a bunch of stuff in middle school. Like my parents were divorcing, my grandmother died. I started at a new school. I went from a tiny private school in elementary school to going to public school for the first time. I went to like a gifted and talented middle school that was enormous. I went from a school that had about 250 students total, nursery through 8th grade. Mm-hmm. So kids 3 to 14 in one building, and it was 250 in total. Like our principal knew everyone by name and knew their parents. Like that's how small the space I grew up in from like kindergarten through 5th grade was to going to a public school in Bushwick that had about 3,000 kids.
Right.
So I was like, there's a lot going on. Like it took a while to adjust.
Totally.
Yeah.
And this is Bushwick in like
Bushwick in 97.
So the idea of it being East Williamsburg is a long shot.
Yeah, I was about
off.
to say we're not even close to things being called East Williamsburg yet. We're talking about Bushwick over 20 years ago.
Oh wow. Yeah, I'm not going to say I imagine that was right, but I'm imagining the vibe of a super packed school in what's considered deep in Brooklyn at the time.
Well, that's deep in Brooklyn as far as I'm concerned, because I was an hour away on the B60. Like I took the public bus to and from school every day. Mm-hmm. So I was on the bus for an hour by myself. As
by yourself as you can get.
Right. But the cool thing was, at least going home, I don't know, I had never heard of schools doing this, and I still haven't heard of other schools doing this, but there would be empty MTA city buses waiting for us as we got out of school because it was a specialized school. It wasn't a zone school. So kids lived all throughout Brooklyn and all throughout New York City.
Yeah.
But a lot of kids did live in Brownsville and East New York and Canarsie. So we lived along the B60 line. And so there would be 3 or 4 empty buses at 3 o'clock for the kids to just file into and fill up. And that ride was just, instead of yellow cheese buses, we had our own MTA buses. But it was a nightmare to other people trying to get home. You walk into a bus after work and you just see like 50 12-year-olds losing their minds.
Yeah. Current Bushwick residents, I think, would get on that bus and swiftly get off.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They'd
call the authorities.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I just like, because I love living here, and I love when people who think they know New York get it, are proven wrong. Like I would love to, if I ever get a chance to do like a TV show, I'd want to do like a hidden camera show where we just put tourists on a bus and take them to the outer boroughs. Not like trick people, but just like, go to Times Square and be like, there's so much more. Come on, I'll show you.
Like the Bronx exists. That sort of thing.
Yeah. There's more to the Bronx than just baseball or
the zoo.
Yeah. Or China. There's a Chinatown in Queens. Wow.
I love how I've lived here my whole life. I'm like, is there a Chinatown in Staten Island? Because I feel like most of the boroughs have one. I have no idea if there's one in Staten Island.
Oh God, I feel like there should be, right?
Right.
My idea of Staten Island is it's mostly Italian, Irish, and retired mobsters.
I don't think you're wrong.
Yeah, I imagine there has to be a Chinatown on Staten Island somewhere. If you're listening to this and you live in Staten Island's Chinatown, tweet me at Comic Will Carry. Because Brooklyn's Chinatown is like near Sunset Park. That's
for the most part, near Bay Ridge, like further out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then Queens is out in Flushing, and then Manhattan's is Canal Street area. Right. Did you ever spend a lot of time in Chinatown? I love hanging out in
my
Chinatown.
Office is in Chinatown, so I literally just came from there.
Oh, spectacular! So much good food. Wow. Okay, so you're growing up in deeper Brooklyn, going to school in deep Brooklyn. So you have this culture shock of going from like I would imagine a more like personally attentive educational environment, and then this is high school that you switched to?
Middle school.
Middle school.
Yeah.
Now, where did you go to high school? And the reason I'm asking this is because I've heard that you can pick your high school in New York.
Not necessarily. I could, because this is the big controversial thing that's happening right now. I went to Brooklyn Tech, which is one of the specialized high schools in New York City that you test into. But also, because I live in Brownsville, there is no zone high school in Brownsville. So since there's no zone school, you can choose where you go if they accept you. So no matter what, I would have had to have chosen a high school, but thankfully I tested well and passed to get into the school that I wanted to go to.
Right, which is Brooklyn
Tech.
And why did you want to go there?
Literally my middle school is like, it's kind of like a public prep school. They're prepping you to go to the better high schools, then hopefully leading to the better colleges. And I think more than a solid third of my 8th grade graduating class I went to high school with. So we went from Bushwick to Fort Greene together.
Okay.
Like hundreds of kids. So high school wasn't like a weird adjustment period because I already knew so many people when I got there. I didn't have to start from scratch.
Yeah, that's kind of how my hometown was, because it's by zones. So if you live in this area, you go here, and then if you live in this area, you go here. Which technically
New York City does work that way, except for these situations.
That particular situation,
right?
Okay, so yeah, so I literally I sat next to this one kid at assemblies for my entire life because line them up alphabetically, and that's how it goes.
Hope you like this person because you're going to be next to them forever.
Yeah, we were all right. We weren't best friends, but he didn't bully me.
Good.
And then And this is something else I also like. I like talking about as well. So in high school, so we're talking like the 90s. What kind of music are you listening to around then?
I started high school in 2000, and I was the biggest teeny bopper on the planet.
Yeah.
Loved the shit out of boy bands.
Mm-hmm.
So very much about NSYNC, Backstreet Boys, even like third-rate ones like O-Town and
O-Town,
LFO.
Five.
Yes, I did. I loved Five. I had all their albums.
They had more than one?
I think Five literally had probably about 5+ albums.
That makes sense. Yeah, like so everybody under that Lou Pearlman umbrella.
Yeah.
Have you I haven't seen that documentary yet.
Neither have I. I've seen the Backstreet Boys documentary where they touch on what a creep Lou Pearlman was, but I haven't seen the one specifically about him yet.
Yeah, I would really want to watch that because just the one pull quote I remember from it is like Ashley from O-Town gets his first check. He's like, I could have made this much working full time at Starbucks. Because I remember like when Making of the Bands or was on MTV and they were putting O-Town together. So
no, that was on ABC because it was part of TGIF when it started that first season.
Oh yeah, you're right.
I was a diehard. Yeah. I used to see O-Town whenever they were in New York. They literally knew me because I was at all their like PR events.
Oh, that's
in
great.
2001, I saw them at least once a month, every month that year.
Wow. And this is at like our full-blown concerts, or they're like doing like in-stores?
In-stores. They did so many in-stores back then. I remember going to the NBA store to see O-Town perform.
The NBA store?
The first time I ever saw them was them doing a contest called Making the Fan at the Planet Hollywood that used to be in Times Square.
Oh, Planet Hollywood. You would love, if you ever get a chance to, I don't know if you've ever been to Tokyo, but if you ever, if you go, you need to go to the Shibuya Tower Records because there will be an in-store performance going on.
There's still a Tower Records in Tokyo?
Yes. There's a couple.
Jealous.
There's also one in Dublin.
I'm so jealous.
That was the first Tower Records I ever went into was one in Tokyo.
Well, because there used to be one here.
I remember, but I wasn't here when it was there.
Wow.
Yeah, so you will, I mean, everybody's, so you must be all about BTS right now.
No, I feel like I'm too old for everything. I was like, I don't know what the kids are listening to. I can't get into it. Though literally, I went for a walk at lunchtime earlier and I saw a bunch of girls lined up outside the Verizon building. Apparently, BTS was heading there.
That makes sense. They just were on, they just did SNL and then they were on The Late Show, Stephen Colbert. So here's the thing: there's not a too old. I don't believe in that. For me, there's a too old to be going to certain bands' shows,
right?
Because I'm trying to think what's a good example. So like I grew up on like early 2000s pop punk, so like Blink-182, Sum 41,
also love them, yeah,
all of that kind of stuff.
I mean, I just love I love top 40 R&B and hip hop, some dance music, like a little bit of everything for real. But like my absolute thing was the boy bands. What do you think? What was it about boy? And we're talking like 4 to 5 member choreographed dancing. Yes,
where there's like the certain type. There's the one who's going to have
the old one, the young one, the cute one, the bad boy, all that. Yeah, all that.
What do you think it was about boy bands that you were drawn to? I think
they were packaged and presented well, and I was that perfect age when they became a popular thing again. Like, think about it this way: like, I was too young to have really been into New Kids on the Block and New Edition.
Yeah.
But when NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys got popular, like, I was 11 years old. I was their target demographic.
Right.
So it's just like, oh, wow. This is fun. This is for me. They're cute. This is fun. And it was a bonding thing. Like, some of my friends that we were all diehards together, you trade pictures and posters. And, like, you go to the concerts together if you can. My grown-ass friends, we still do that. Like, the Backstreet Boys, they still tour very regularly. I've gone to see them once as an adult.
How was that?
What's funny is I saw them when they were touring as NKOT BSB. That was the New Kids and the Backstreet Boys touring as a supergroup.
Yep, I remember that.
I enjoyed the Backstreet Boys, but then that night I fell in love with the New Kids because, like I said, I was too young the first go round.
Sure.
And after that, my friends and I decided, oh snap, we're gonna go see New Kids whenever they're in town, because they were so much more entertaining than the Backstreet Boys to me. They put on such an amazing show. They did a tour called the Package Tour where they were headlining. It was New Kids on the Block, 98 Degrees and Boys to Men. That was a phenomenal show. 7 of us went to see it in Nassau Coliseum. Again, we're talking, this is like 2013. So like, we're a bunch of grown women. 7 of us went to see
You're probably not the only ones there.
I know. We went and saw it at Nassau Coliseum, had a fantastic time. We had such a good time that we were all joking, like, if they add a date in Brooklyn, we'll go see it again. And then lo and behold, they added a date at Barclays. And so we're like, okay. So the 7 of us that went and saw it at Nassau were just like, yeah, we'll see it again. Our group grew to 14. 14 of us went to see it at Barclays. But we're just like, let's get cheap seats. We've seen the show already. The tickets we get were literally at the very top row of Barclays. Like, we could touch the ceiling if we wanted to. And then out of nowhere, some woman approaches us. Like, I'm sitting kind of in the middle of my friends. The woman comes up to me for some reason, and she's like, are you guys sitting here, like, of your own volition? I was like, well, these are the tickets we paid for. And she goes, do you want to move up? And like a dummy, I'm just like, where? As if anywhere wouldn't be an improvement. She just points down. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds good. And she asks, how many of you are there? I tell her 14. And she goes, well, I have 11 tickets. You guys, and I'm in my head, I'm just like, how am I going to make this work? Because this was all kind of my idea to come in the first place. And so I'm just like, yeah, we'll take them. We'll make it work. And this woman, she goes, just go down there and pass them back fake ID style. I don't know who this woman was, who she worked for, but she just gave us these tickets. And we went down. Lo and behold, these seats were in the 4th row.
Oh, wow.
So we went from the worst seats in the house to the 4th
arguably
row.
The best. Because like 5th row is great because you don't have to like pan your head back and forth to see everything. It just
all
kind of
right in front of
encapsulate everything at once. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's so cool. That's happened to me at Jones Beach. It was the Honda Civic tour. It was Blink-182, My Chemical Romance, and Alkaline Trio. And I had
sounds like a really fun show.
Oh, it was so much fun. When Blink were playing Always, it started pouring down rain and continued to pour down rain for the rest of the set, but we were all just so into it. And I had like really high up seats, and then they were like, you can move.
You guys can move.
They were like, go down and like not like all the way up front, but like on the ground level. And I was like, great.
Perfect.
That sounds perfect.
That is really perfect.
And like those songs, like I always consider Backstreet Boys more of like a vocal group compared to where like more about the singing, less about the dancing.
Right.
But like
not to be confused though, like Backstreet Boys do have moves, and like I used to watch a lot of their concerts on VHS. And the thing is, they're not my favorite dancers in the world, but they have some choreography that is still a little classic. Like think about the video for Everybody Backstreet's Back.
Oh yeah. That's a pretty.
And then there's a chair routine in As Long As You Love Me. Like they've got some cute stuff. But NSYNC was doing backflips and shit. Like it was really acrobatic and hard dancing.
Yeah, I mean that like bye. That's like immortal. Even people who are like ugh, gross. They know that.
Yeah, and they can't help it. If they hear the song, they're going to do it.
Yeah, and those songs like I read somewhere there's like some guy. There's like one guy. Arguably, I think he's Swedish, who wrote like all of the boy band and girl band songs.
Max Martin did all of that.
Yeah, I would love to sit down with him someday and just ask him what his formula is because he's probably got it down to a science.
It was Max Martin and Dennis Pop. Dennis Pop died years ago, but like those guys crafted like everything.
Yeah,
that's the thing. Like Swedish people. Like what they excel at is pop music. Like I was just there in Stockholm and I went to the ABBA museum. Like,
oh really? Oh cool.
They are so serious about pop music. It's absurd. This one group has an entire museum and the museum is extensive. So it's serious business.
Okay. So if you want to dip your toes into K-pop, BTS is like the gateway drug. I have young
relatives who were like obsessed. One of my little cousins, like all the adults in the family knows that she's into BTS, and it's funny watching her and how she feels about them. Because I was like, it's like watching myself in the past, except a different group.
Sure.
She got a bunch of BTS stuff for Christmas and immediately just burst into tears of joy. She lost it, and like my mom and my aunt are like, "What's happening?" Like they just had no clue. And like,
and you're just like, I know.
I get it. I get it. I was just like, I would have loved if everyone had gotten me a bunch of NSYNC crap when I was a kid. Usually I would take my allowance and go grab the stuff myself. But she was just gifted a bunch of BTS stuff, and she was over the moon about it. So it is kind of cute to see a new generation have their thing.
Yeah, it never changes. Like, just,
it doesn't. Also, except this one's going to be better because now these girls will be learning Korean. They're just going to be so well rounded.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, look up the song Euphoria. That's my favorite song they do. That's like their that's like one of their sensitive ballady ones. That's a pretty catchy song. I also I've gotten really into not Japanese pop, but Japanese punk rock is. Japan has like a ton of really great pop punk and heavy rock bands that I just am really digging on right now.
That's funny. My boyfriend wanted to take me. I forgot their name, but there is a super cute group of Japanese girls who do metal. And
Baby metal?
Yes, my boyfriend wants to take me to a baby metal concert.
Yes, that would be a fun one. I enjoy their stuff because they have like a legit like heavy like not hardcore, but more like a metalcore kind of band. There's lots of like breakdowns, and then the choruses are really big sounding, and then there are these tiny girls dressed in like kawaii like J-pop uniforms
they're really cute.
that sing over this like all this heavy guitar music. Yeah, like if I was fronting the band that Baby Metal has, it would have to be like roar, 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 exactly. Like the deaf growly stuff.
It's so intense.
Okay, so you're growing up on mainstream pop music, and what happens after high school? What's
I went to Brooklyn College.
And what did you study?
Psychology.
Oh, good. Could you tell me what's wrong with me? I bet there's a few comedians that have asked that question.
No, I don't think we want to know what's wrong with us. We're just gonna make it work somehow, some way.
Yeah. So psychology.
Psychology.
Cool.
And then I ended up working in like childcare for years. I've had like a million different jobs.
I know. I saw that now this video where you've worked like 750,000 jobs.
Pretty much. I've done a little bit of everything, except oddly enough, I've never worked food service or like direct retail ever. Like I've never worked in a shop.
So those two are my bread and butter.
I've never.
You don't start.
I'm not. Oh God, no, I'm not. I work for the state now, so I don't.
Perfect.
I don't think that's
good. That's good. Yeah, I was in retail for 10 years, and then I did food service briefly, but not real food service. It was Starbucks, so I consider that more of a coffee shop.
Right.
And then I did like boiler room call center stuff for a while, which hurts. Like I literally the last job I had, call center job I literally had to, before every shift I had to sit, take a deep breath to compose myself, and then just cover up the clock so time would go faster. It was brutal because it was like, I mean, it probably wouldn't have been so bad if like the company was run better, but I was always giving the bad news. That was the result of nothing I did.
Yeah, and people on the phone who are just wanting to know things don't care. They may understand, but they don't care that it's not your fault.
Exactly. I remember one time we were closed for like a week during Hurricane Sandy, and when we came back the next week and someone called, they were mad that I was calling all last week and I couldn't get through it. And I was at the point, I was like, I'm the only person who shows up here on time. They're not going to fire me. So I was like, well, sir, I don't know if you followed the news, but my city was underwater the past week. People are dead, sir. People have died.
And how much longer did you have that job?
I had it for like another 2 years. So, and have you always been in New York? Have you ever lived anywhere else?
I've always been in New York.
Always been in New York. Have never thought about wanting to live anywhere else.
Because I've been lucky enough to like travel the world a lot, and I feel like if I were to leave New York, it would be for LA or another country. I feel like there's no middle ground.
Yeah, I've got a couple of other countries planned. I've got my I want to retire on the beach country. I've got my I want to lay back country. I've got my analogous keep the same frantic lifestyle country. I'm all set.
Yeah.
What kind of places have you traveled to? Because I like talking about this also.
I've seen a lot of like I said, I just got back from Sweden. That was the first time I'd visited a Nordic country. Had a great time there. Let's see, England, Scotland, France, Germany, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg.
Where in France?
I've been mostly in Paris.
Mostly Paris.
Paris.
If you ever get to go to Cannes, Cannes is lovely.
I would love to go to Cannes. My boyfriend and I were talking about taking a trip to Nice sometime soon.
Nice is beautiful.
That's what I keep hearing, so I'm looking forward to that. Nigeria, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Mexico, the Bahamas. And I think that's most of the places I've been.
Oh, so we got to get you to Asia.
I'm not in any rush to get to Asia. I feel like I'll be there eventually.
They've got it figured out. They'll be fine. It's most of Asia is not going anywhere.
Right. But also, I mean, you can probably relate to this. I feel like I would feel like a giant person, like just literally uncomfortable.
I feel that way everywhere I travel.
Okay, yeah.
So it doesn't bother me too much. The only issues I had or kind of hop in between traveling Air Asia, the seats are kind of small.
Right, and that's too long of a flight to be uncomfortable.
That's the only issue I've had. So spring for like the bigger spring for the American centered flights is how.
So what it sounds like to me is if I'm going to Asia, it'll be on someone else's dime, so I could fly first class. That is the plan.
Exactly. But I've had and I never so much of Southeast Asia was never on my radar as places, but that's where my fiance likes to go, so that's where I've been, right. And I just saw and ate so much great stuff that I never thought I'd get to see or eat, and it was pretty spectacular. Outside of Japan, which I think a lot of our friends are going to lately, which is good because I've got a list of recommendations I just send them. Like, hey, here you go.
I love going places my friends have been, so I'll just be like, hey, what do I do?
When you get to Tokyo, let me know because I've got that list dialed. In Asia, people, I feel like it's most Asian countries I've been to, it's a more reserved culture, or or maybe it's just a different vibe of culture. Like, so people were not coming up to me, or like, except for this one pair of grandmas who snuck a picture of me on the Tokyo subway. But like, I was in India in India and Nepal in March, and I took pictures. I started keeping track with 44 different people.
Because they just see you and want to take a photo with you.
Just see the big tall Westerner, or they see my fiance who's blonde, and they're just like, oh, they want to take photos.
Well, that's my uncle and aunt went to China, and people wanted to take photos with them all the time. I think, not being a celebrity yet, I would not want that. You know what I mean? I'm just like,
sure.
You're just like, oh, look at the Negro. Like, that's what that feels like to me.
Right.
And I'm just like, that's weird. And
right. It feels like it's like some kind of like I'm
it's
blanking
like a
the word.
Sideshow. You know?
Exactly.
It's weird. I don't like that.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I'm an attention whore, so I'm just like.
But also, like my uncle said, someone thought he was Magic Johnson. He looks nothing like Magic Johnson. Also, he's probably like a foot shorter than him easily. You know, like, right. I was just like, that's strange.
They're just like, oh, you're black. You're obviously Magic Johnson.
Exactly.
Yeah, I could definitely see how that would be.
That's why I'm like I said, I'm in no rush. I'll get there when I get there.
Totally. And have you ever done comedy internationally?
I did a show in Stockholm.
Oh, awesome.
Which was very fun.
How'd it go?
It went very well. It's funny because I performed at a British club in Stockholm on what they consider an international show. So the first half is in English and the second half is in Swedish.
Oh, interesting.
So I closed the first half, the English half, because I know about 2.5 words in Swedish. So
yeah,
that was fun doing that.
That's awesome. I used to I performed in a British pub in Tokyo on a show.
This is our loophole. Just you find the British clubs in international cities, and boom, great places to perform.
Oh my God, and everyone's so nice. It's always fun. Let me ask you this: did you find any of your jokes, the Swedish crowd reacted to wildly differently than American crowds do?
Not necessarily, because I did revamp a lot of my stuff, because I think so. Actually, a lot of my comedy is very New York centric. Because I perform here more than anywhere else, so I do have lots of jokes that are more relevant to New York crowds. So I got rid of a lot of that, and I referenced as much Swedishness as I could, or I wasn't explaining my jokes as I performed, but I gave a little more background than I ordinarily would for some setups.
Right, yeah.
Just to make it relevant to the crowd.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'd found that like, I had this joke about Americans and guns that crushed in Japan, and I think that was like my one Bill Hicks moment.
Because they think we like eat with guns instead of spoons here, like internationally.
I could just. That's probably not too far off.
Not because I remember when I was in Nigeria, I was visiting family. My cousins were like, "Where do you keep your gun?" And I was like, "What? Where do you keep your gun?" I was like, "I don't have a gun." And they're like, "Of course you have a gun. You're from America." I was like, "No, I really don't." They were convinced I was lying to them.
Right.
They're like, "Everyone has a gun." I was like, "That's not true." I was like, "I don't think I've ever even seen a gun outside of like on a cop's holster."
Yeah. Well, in New York, and the only reason I know this is because of the when Anthony Cumia got in trouble. It is apparently possible to get a permit to conceal and carry a firearm in New York City, but it is such a crazy amount of bureaucratic hoops. Mm-hmm. Whereas if they had asked my dad that, they would have been like, well, which gun are we talking about? My dad is totally that guy.
You grew up in a rural setting. I get it. But yeah, I grew up in New York City where I'm sure people have guns, but it's for the most part wildly illegal here.
Yeah.
And also I work for the court system. So if I wanted a gun, I could just get a position where that's part of the job. It's part of my job to carry a gun as a ironically titled peace officer.
Yeah. well, yeah, peace one way or the other. How do you want to do it? and then where does comedy come into the picture here?
Like I said, I was working in childcare a lot after college, and then I was working at a daycare center, and I had just got kind of fed up, not with the kids, but with the adults I was working with. Mm-hmm. And I decided I was just done.
Yeah.
I was just done. And I left that job. So I had a lot of free time on my hands. And so I started going to comedy shows. I started going to Whiplash.
Yeah.
Which used to happen at the Chelsea, rest in peace, the Chelsea UCB.
Yeah, the Chelsea UCB.
11 p.m. on Mondays. When you don't have a day job, it's easy to go out at 11 p.m. on Mondays.
Yeah.
So I would go to that show every week, and then I started meeting comics and hanging out after shows at bars, and the comics kind of peer pressured me into it. They were just like, "So when are you going to get up? When are you going to get up?" Mm-hmm. And I was like, "Nah, not for me. No thanks."
Uh-huh. And which comics are we talking about? Like anyone that I know?
Back then,
because Whiplash is like has been considered like one of the like premier like shows of
back then. I mean, it was a lot. But, like, the person who actually pushed me over the edge into doing it was Mike Lawrence.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I met him after the first time he did Whiplash, and he was over the moon about it. He was so excited, and he was just like, you've got to do it, too. I don't think it was the first time we met, but we were talking that night after he had done it for the first time. Mm-hmm. And he was just like, you need to do an open mic tomorrow. And I was just like, well, how about you pump your brakes? Give me a minute to write a thing or two, and then... Sure. Then I'll do an open mic. And then maybe a few weeks later, I was just like, okay, I'm ready. And my whole thing was, I said, if I don't die and I get some laughs, I do comedy now. Uh-huh. And so the first mic I ever did was at what was the Pit back then, which is now the Pit Loft.
Yes.
Jay Welch's like 2.5 to 3 minute mic.
Oh, Tuesdays at 11?
Yes, Tuesdays at 11 p.m. Again, when you don't have a day job, going out and starting your night at 11 p.m. is an option. Mm-hmm. And there were like, I think about 45 people at the mic that night, and I was number 42. But wow, yeah, I did
Those
it.
are the days.
I did it. That was it.
Awesome.
And I remember I went to that mic a couple times before I did it, like just to observe. And I met Kevin Barnett for the first time at that mic, and I remember telling him, "You were the funniest person here, hands down."
Yeah,
he was. He went above and beyond everybody.
Oh my God, yeah. I remember I would see him when I first moved here was when he was around a lot, and I would get to see him a bunch, and he always really made me laugh. So
he's just one of the funniest people ever. I just thought he was so absurdly talented.
Yeah, he was amazing.
And a
he was
good
amazing.
dude. He's just a good dude.
Yeah, like years later, I would go. I went like the last time I saw him, it was like I think it was at Lucky Jack's, and. He was like, "Oh, hey, Will, what's going on?" I was like, "Ask him, oh, hey, what have you got going on?" I was like, "Oh man, just trying to get some things going on." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I hear you." Like I feel like, at a point where he's like light years beyond me. So like he does not have to give me the time of day, but he did. And that was very nice. And I was so excited to see him when I saw, Sleepwalk with Me, Mike Birbiglia's movie.
Yeah.
It was so cool. I was like, I know that guy. I know that joke. So it was really cool to get to see that. Yeah, I wish I had got to see him more recently before he passed away. But I'm glad that I got to see him the few times I did. So you're hooked right then, and this is 2010 then.
Yeah, this is 2010.
Oh wow.
So I did my first open mic in May, and then I started my show in August.
Oh, your show at Union Hall.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's been going on pretty much the entire time I've known you.
It started August of 2010, and it's still going on.
That's awesome.
So yeah, that's exciting. I've never been dedicated to anything for so long. I've never committed to anything for this long in my life. That's
spectacular. And for anyone listening, to run a monthly stand-up comedy show in New York City for I would say any length of time over a year is a massive accomplishment. And your show's been going on for almost 9 years.
Yeah.
That and at Union Hall, I consider, I've never done a set there, but I just consider that like one of like the coolest venues in New York. Like I've seen so much cool stuff there. So
and it's crazy because there's so much comedy there now. It's comedy almost, I think, any given night of the week. And when we started Cheap Date, I think outside of Greg Barris doing his like occasional show, because his show wasn't monthly, I think the only regular shows there were was Cheap Date and Eugene Merman's show.
Yep.
That was it 9 years ago. The place is totally different now.
Yeah, and now I think that's where Birbiglia goes to work out now.
He does,
I've seen him there a couple times.
He's been working out there since the beginning because there have been times where his show was happening right before or right after Cheap Date. So,
cool.
Like we would bump into each other in the backstage area, setting up and breaking down.
That's awesome.
And he's always been very nice.
Yeah, I've met him a handful of times, like under various situations. I sent him an email. I hope I get a response eventually. I would love to talk to him for long because he came into the Starbucks I worked at once. He talked to me after his Carnegie Hall show, which was very nice. He answered my question for a Q&A at Don't Think Twice, and I think I've interacted with him at least one other time. But yeah, he was a big part of the reason I started to focus more on like long form comedy. Compared to when I started, I was doing basically just one-liners.
Got it. That's never been my style. I respect one-liners, and I used to write for some e-cards where the format was strictly one-liners.
Yeah.
And it took a while to like configure my brain to write in that fashion because that's not naturally how I go. My style is very much in the vein of storytelling.
Yeah. It's very, very conversational, and again, you're building a narrative, and you're hitting jokes along the way, but it's not like a set up, punch, twist,
right,
kind of thing. Yeah.
So it's just like I'm amazed at people who paint the long paintings, but people who can just ba 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 with one-liners. I bless them. I think that's such an amazing skill.
Yeah, I really enjoy the guys and girls who can do it super well. I love those kinds of jokes, like ones where you're just like, oh, I didn't see that, you got me. It's like watching like someone shoot a bow and arrow and just nail bullseye and then hit the arrow over and over again.
It's impressive.
Yeah. So how do you keep a show going for 9 years? Because I got exhausted after 2 doing my show at the Creek, which I'm glad you got to do before I got taken off the calendar.
Roster?
Yeah, or as far as like just having people there every time that you do the show. That's my biggest weakness as far as a businessman.
I think part of it, the venue is great and they do their own outreach. The venue itself has its audience, which is helpful.
Yeah.
And I think also a benefit of I'm from here. So like I've got friends that go way back that'll come and support the show. Like literally my friends from high school, friends from middle school will show up. My family will show up randomly. I never know who will be there, but people come out of the woodwork and will show up for my show, which is really awesome. And I think that's also, if I was weekly, which people used to try to convince me to go weekly, I had zero desire. I'm like, when something is monthly, it feels like an event.
Yeah.
Like you'll take the time to be like, oh, it's happening then. I'll put that time aside and I'll do that. When it's happening too often, people kind of lose interest. You get into the mind frame of, I'll go next week. I'll go next week. I'll go next week. Next thing you know, 3 years have passed, you know?
Exactly.
So that's why I think, monthly is the move.
Yeah. I'm inclined to agree as well, because keeping like week to week, like God bless comedy clubs that are doing like multiple shows like
per night
or over the course of a week. That's I couldn't do it.
That's amazing. It's just also you'd have to be, if you're producing, you'd have to be consuming so much comedy to keep a varied roster going if you're booking every night, every week. And I would love to take in more comedy, though currently my schedule has not allowed it for not for just being at shows that I'm not necessarily on.
Sure.
But yeah, you've got to consume so much comedy to properly put on a show and make sure things are quality every time.
Yeah.
So I think that's super important.
Yeah, absolutely. You just gotta curate it like a fine wine, just like you have an excellent vintage
and balance. Like you got to make sure that the comics in style are diverse enough where you don't have 4 of the same jokes happening.
Yeah, exactly.
With every performer,
you don't have a bunch of like aggressive topical people, like just a steady stream of that. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuances to it that, and I think people until they do, because I imagine there's we're all just trying to like get up on stage as much as possible, but the nuances that go into curating a night, and then also trying to because again, get on people that you want to get on, and then also make sure that there's people that are going to be in the room. Yeah, it's a lot of work that I don't think enough people appreciate.
Well, that's funny because you mentioned that on Facebook lately. There've been so many posts about how not to ask for spots on shows or how to produce a show. Like that's been the big discussion lately.
Yeah.
And I get it.
Yeah, what I do is the most I've ever done. I never take any rejection personally because I get it. The most I've ever done, what I've tended to start doing is like, if I could do your show in 3 to 4 years, let me know. Let me know.
I don't want to be on your short list. You can put me on the long list.
Oh yeah, that's always where I'm at. It's like I don't have much going on right now, but you just wait till 2023. And I have packed calendar, and then also that's why I started like putting a lot of thought into the podcast, which is just having like another thing that I can use to be creative.
Yeah.
Like and just like branching out on different ways of like being creative and then connecting with people.
And you edit it yourself as well?
I do everything.
Okay.
I reach out to all the guests, edit as much as I can. Yeah.
That's awesome. I have zero patience for editing, so
I like it. It's kind of detailed. That's the kind of like detail oriented work that growing up one step on the grid, on the square before the grid ends, you get the kind of patience and like, oh, let me try this. Or just the afternoons I spend with like, okay, I gotta stick in 5 hours until the sun goes down. Let me go make some memories.
There you go. I respect it. I respect it.
Well, and I also respect people that are like born and raised in New York and still love it. I feel the other thing that goes around too much on the internet is like this either sincere or comedic disdain for New York. And I'm like, if you don't like it, leave so I can get your spots.
No, I love New York.
Same here.
Both of my parents were born in Brooklyn. You know, it's home. It's home, and it's great. And I think it's so different from literally anywhere else in a great way. So. Like, you're not going to get the New York experience anywhere else. And it's just, even though what the New York experience is constantly changing, it's still its own thing entirely.
Absolutely. Canal Aurora we were talking about that, how like just New York is constantly shifting. One more thing I want to ask you, and then I know you got a show to get to. What is something? What's a project comedy wise you haven't done yet that you want to do?
That a feature, like a feature length film. I would love to. Yeah, that's the goal here.
You want to write or
write,
direct,
star in, all the things. Because like I've written a sitcom with friends, not just the pilot. We've written an entire first season of a thing.
Cool.
Trying to shop that around. There's some features that are rolling around in my head that I need to commit to paper at this point. But yeah, I'd love to do it all. Like I've been lucky enough to get some commercial work over the past few years. I've been a part of plenty of web series. I was lucky enough to be part of IFC's Comedy Crib. I did a show for that. So yeah, like I would love to be primetime television, feature films.
Yeah,
that's the next step as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm seeing where I want to. That's my long-term project as well, is finishing the outline that I've got half done, and then like hammering that out, and then continuing to get bigger and bigger, and continuing to get the podcast to grow.
Yeah,
I'm on the Mark Maron model.
I love it. So I have a podcast as well, but it's very concentrated. Like I have a podcast with Katie Compa and our friend Kyle Stephen Porter called The Shade of It All, which is about RuPaul's Drag Race. So it's just, I say it's like Sports Center for Drag Race.
Gotcha. Oh, awesome. What else can we plug before we get out here?
Well, we talked about my show Cheap Date. That's at Union Hall in Park Slope, Brooklyn. The next one is Saturday, June 29th. I believe it's at 10 p.m. I'm trying to think. Yeah, like Shade of It All, Cheap Date. Look into all of it. If you see me pop up in a commercial, go, yay, I listened to her on a podcast. Because there'll be a few more coming out soon.
Excellent. Sounds good. Thank you so much for talking to me, Sharron.
Yay, had a good time. Thanks.
Appreciate it. Okay, folks, that's our show. Thank you again for listening, and thank you, Sharron, for your time and hospitality. I appreciate you coming over, and thank you guys again for listening. If you enjoyed this and want to share the show with others, we are on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. You can add us to your fave playlist or hit subscribe. That helps other people find the show. And if you think you know someone who might enjoy this, please feel free to let them know. My success is built on creating something that people connect with enough that they would want to share it with others. That's, I think, one of the more people talk about, like social media metrics and search engine optimization, and that's important for discovery, but I live or die by how good a show I make. So if you enjoyed this, thank you very much for listening, and I will see you guys next week between awesome and disaster. Take care, everybody.